Hello, everyone. My name is Alistair Ballantyne, and you are listening to the Big Soup Podcast. This week, back by popular demand, or should I say, some strategic messaging from people egging me on to do more of this, we have Dr. Love, Part 2. And we're going to carry on with some of the weird AF dating advice around communication that we see on social media and why it harms rather than helps you come into a more meaningful connection with others and yourself in very disconnected, meaningless times. So we got up to point number 5 on the list of shame last week. Now, don't worry if you haven't heard the first part of this show. That's okay. You can dive right in, but it might be helpful for you to go back and listen if you have not, because this is a long list of nonsense, shall we say. Now, number 5, high value people never show vulnerability. Now, here is an interesting thing because the concept of a high value person has been doing the rounds in recent years on social media, which, some people get it, most people don't, as is the way on the internet. Most people don't, because when we see these conversations around someone being high value, for the most part, it relates to material and physical aspects. And one of the issues with this is who decides what is the high value and what is not high value, who decides what is desirable and what isn't desirable. And if you are coming from a minority or mixed background, or you're living in a society that has had some kind of weird misplaced nostalgia for the way things didn't used to be, but they probably secretly wanted them to be, you might find that what is considered high value is actually pretty heinous and backwards. But for the most part, when we are basing our relationships on the same model that we would do a business transaction, we're going to run into trouble. And when we're looking at this idea of the high value person not showing vulnerability, there is a sense of rigidity to this. There is a sense of inflexibility to this. And it's, again, something that we've touched on in previous episodes when we're looking at ideas around strength. What a lot of people think is desirable is unworkable, unsustainable, and so brittle that it won't actually take that much to snap the whole thing in two. And when we're peeling back the lid on this kind of mentality, and we're seeing folks that are obsessed with finding themselves a high value individual, what is that person bringing to the table? And more often than not, it seems to be a justification for this weird epidemic of entitlement that we are living through at the moment, where people are positioning themselves as the center of the universe and everything needs to sort of go around them. And I will tell you this for free. If we're thinking about high value people, we need to reframe that, because it's not just about the material. It's not just about the physical. It is about the mental, the intellectual, the spiritual, the emotional, the self-reflectiveness, the self-awareness, the ability to look at themselves with a critical eye, an objective eye, rather than clamping themselves down against anyone and anything that maybe challenges their view of self. Also, in our world, we're obsessed with hierarchies. We're obsessed with climbing the imaginary social ladder. And a lot of people tend to gravitate towards relationships because they see them as having some degree of social currency. Now, any relationship that I've had has been because I'm interested in the person. I'm not really interested in all of the status stuff that surrounds them. Now, not everyone's the same, but I can only speak for myself. And the reason I mention these qualities is we're living in a world that aspires to the most backwards thing, we're living in a world that aspires to the most backwards things, the most vacuous celebrities treated like gods. And supposedly there is this checkbox list of success dictated to you by social media, reality TV. That's an oxymoron if there ever was one, and anything that is separating you further from yourself. We don't need hierarchy in relationships, because then that ultimately turns the relationship into a battleground, because relationship are two or more people, obviously, because a relationship ultimately with the people involved, everyone should be working together to elevate each other, not a sense of one person outshining the other. I find it interesting because if relationships are about reciprocal connection, where we give to one another, what are we bringing to the table? There's a lot of criticism out there about people looking for surrogate parents in their partnerships, and I agree, the criticism is valid. But on the flip side, all of this stuff about high value nonsense in this lens, it separates us from recognizing where our own value is as humans. We're living in a time of decline of old systems and old powers, and no matter how they try to assert themselves by clamping down, it's not going to work. So why are we embodying that in human connection? Why are we seeking to consciously embody that in our relationships with one another? It's because it's what we know, it's what we've been fed. And of course, when we're looking at the world in this way of hierarchies and social structures and imagined orders and this kind of thing, very colonial imperialist ideologies about what is valuable and what is not, when we try to repress anything that is different, we're not just running the risk, we're absolutely flying the flag for self-oppression and subservience in relationships. This is a very strange thing to me, because as someone who has mixed racial heritage and different cultural influences to draw upon when growing up and exploring what it means to be a human, there were certain things that I saw valued in the community, valued in the family, valued in the people around me, that had nothing to do with the material world. The flip side of that is sometimes that would then mean that they had such a negative view of the material world that they wouldn't be able to advance themselves within that. Again, nuance is important. But if someone is not going to show vulnerability, if someone is going to separate themselves in their ivory tower where they look down on everyone else, why would you want a relationship with that person? Is it for the holiday in Dubai selfies? Personally, holiday in Dubai selfies are the red flag as far as I'm concerned. But there's all of these things. It's symbols and status in a world that is declining. A specific version of the world that is declining, and those symbols of status are only getting more unobtainable and harder to reach for your everyday person. So you never know. You might be listening to advice about how being high value means being hard to get, not showing emotion, all of this kind of thing. But for the most part, I don't think people really have time for this anymore. I don't think people want to give energy to more games in their lives, and a relationship that cannot be built on vulnerability or doesn't have space for vulnerability within the framework of the relationship will never last. It's not a relationship. I've seen people who have chosen to be in relationships like that, married people like that, stay together for years. You give them a few drinks and they're tearing 7 shades of the you know what out of each other because they're so disconnected from one another. There isn't a reality to their connection. There isn't a grounding in reality to their connection. So it doesn't take much for these things to fall apart. And if something falls apart very easily, or with a little bit of scrutiny or a poke in the right place, that's not high value. That is cheap workmanship, and cheap workmanship on the self. And we don't do that around here, my friends. We're all about the self work. We're all about polishing the mirror so we can reflect the light into the world best we can. And we're also all about taking accountability for ourselves. So if there's no vulnerability, there is no accountability. If there is no accountability, it is not a safe space to unpack your bags and call it your home, because it's only a matter of time before you moved out for the next tenant. And a lot of this stuff about high value, the alphas, all of this kind of thing, you look at the people peddling this kind of stuff, they're angry and scared. They don't know themselves, and they're angry and scared of the unknown because they can't deal with anything that's unfamiliar. If you're going to have someone stood next to the ship's wheel with you on the command center or the bridge of your life, You are not going to want someone who is scared and angry about the unknown and things that are different because it's supposedly how things have always been. You're going to want someone who is stable and secure in themselves, at the very least emotionally and energetically. Forget all the material stuff. I mean, that's necessary in some aspects, but without the soft aspects of self, without the connective tissue, without the things that come from vulnerability, you've got nothing. It's like people who say, I can't stand small talk. And it's like, cool. So how are you going to have a conversation that is normal with anyone? Small talk is the connective tissue. If we think about small talk in the community and society, it is the connective tissue between one another to spur on to something else. If we think about vulnerability in a personal relationship, it is the connective tissue to the whole damn thing. So why are you not going to want that? So people not wanting that is beyond me, because they are willingly setting foot on a very lonely and isolating road that ultimately leads to nothing. The only thing they might have is some fun things to share on social media to say about how great their life is, but actually they're living in a very isolated situation where they can't be themselves. There's a lot with this one that's connected to some very troubling aspects that, once we stop with the vulnerability, it's a domino effect. It's only a matter of time. And if you're not going to focus on building a sense of vulnerability with each other from the beginning, then what are you doing? It's a time bomb, There we go. So number 6 is an interesting one, because this one is the green flag checklist or gone by day 30. Now, I'm sure this has been presented in all manner of different kinds of things, but the note here says is that people are not defined by their features. You're not buying a car and then selecting the various different things that you want installed on it. People are human. Humans are organic. Things that are organic are alive, and straight lines and grids and matrix style structures do not exist in nature. So why would you then have this kind of matrix structure bingo card for the new person to meet, when actually a lot of this stuff unfolds over time? You're not going to know who someone is until you face a fundamentally challenging situation for one of you, or everyone involved in the relationship, and how they meet that challenge or how they stand with you through that challenge defines them more than some supposed checklist that you might have on a dating profile. There is also, it also reminds me of that trend called floodlighting, which apparently has become a common thing in dating, which just to me is like some serious toxic stuff. It's this idea of sharing so much up front that it tries to create a sense of intimacy and connection very quickly. This is not natural. This is completely unnatural. When you try to force that level of connection in a relationship from the get-go, that speaks more to behavior that is more in line with addiction than it is with romance. And as someone working in the spirituality well-being world, you wouldn't be surprised at how many times I've seen people try to say to me, I think this person is my divine partner. I think this is a twin flame situation. I think this is my soulmate from a past life. And I'm sat here and my entire body is just like, no, this is nonsense. This is delusion. And you're wanting me to fairy dust this so you can call it fate. Because you say, oh, I went to this reader and he said that as well. No, I'm not that guy. I'm not here to enable very harmful thinking and views of self. So real intimacy has grown over time. And this drive to get someone shoehorned into what you've been told to think is desirable or normal is very unnatural and very undesirable. There is something that I noticed as well, like comparing myself being single at 40 rather than being single at 20. I've not been single the whole time. But in my younger years, I would have been very taken in by that. And I've also made some terrible choices in partners over the years because of that desire to feel close, which was actually just compensating for some stuff in my own life. And there was a sense that if you didn't have that kind of very strong locking in with each other from very early on, then it wasn't going to work. Whereas now, if I feel that that is happening, where things are going too fast, I'm out of there, because if there's one thing that my journey has taught me is that love cannot thrive where your sense of self or, your nervous system is thrown out of whack. Love is about calm and peace, and it's a baseline that you have to tend to, but it's also like a garden that grows over time. This idea of check all the boxes in a month or you're out of here, that's fast food thinking. Fast food does not nourish you, does not fill you up. You'll be hungry half an hour later after you've had it. And it's all of these things that it's turning us into commodities, and turning us into commodities is one of the great crimes of our time. And both of these points today so far are very much about the commodification of self, as is the next one that we'll get to in a moment. People are not precision engineered machine parts. People fit together in the way that they fit together. And every relationship that you're going to have is going to be different. It's going to grow in a different way. You'll connect in different ways because that's just how it goes. When we're conscious and present of ourselves, we know ourselves, it is easier for another person to be known in that situation. You cannot know another if you don't know yourself. And love where you feel known and seen wholeheartedly and being given space to evolve because life is a continual journey of becoming, that's the good stuff. That is the good stuff, and not everything is a red flag, not everything is a green flag. Let's not forget that people can put on an act in the early days to get where they want to be, and then the real person comes out. If you're going to be with someone who is real from the get-go, be comfortable with a steadier pace and a slower gear of connection, because love that brews organically, love that grows organically, is the love that will last. And I've always said, I believe that a good component of love is friendship. You have to be friends with each other. You have to respect each other. And these things, again, take time to evolve. So you can't force it. You can't rush it. And when we do, it stops us from having those more. And when we do, it stops those higher aspects of connection. Coming back to the idea of connective tissue, spiritual connection in a relationship is connective tissue. It's recognizing that there is space for things to grow and evolve, and we can become something more in this shared space together while retaining our individuality and our agency and autonomy within things. These kinds of ideas of advice, like the first one about high value people not showing vulnerability, you can't do that if you don't show vulnerability. The next one, green flags completed by day 30 or they're gone, you can't grow an organic love and connection with that kind of mentality, because you're always going to be thinking, well, if they don't measure up, I'm just going to try someone else in their space. And that brings me to point number 7. Which there's always someone better. Keep swiping. I mean, sure. Where do we even begin with this one? Because it's great that we have this level of connection with each other. It's not great that, so many negative things are coming of it because we don't know how to use it consciously. But there is an art to organic connection. I've got no problem with people using dating apps. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm on a few of them myself at this point in time, the time of recording, purely because it's, with the way I live my life and how I work and things, it's not always easy to meet someone, so there is that kind of awareness there. But the idea of just keeping swiping and churning through all of these profiles and all this kind of stuff is a really weird energy, because what people don't realize is that if they are not being vulnerable with each other, they're trying to speed run the connection, nothing's ever going to feel right, because you're trying to get someone else to conform with standards that don't make sense and standards that might not feel natural. And This is a very, very difficult thing, because this reminds me of a conversation that was taking place among friendship group a few months ago, that ultimately in any group, people over time will pair off with each other. It's just the nature of things. You build a connection grows, let's go down this line, fantastic, cool, whatever. But we're not really set up to have access to so many people, so many different ideas. And if we want to have a sort of more conscious connection with ourselves and with others in a world that is fastly digitally hybridizing everything, we have to recognize the nuances of the individual. We have to recognize that every individual situation is unique. Every connection is unique. Every relationship is unique. That doesn't necessarily mean ignoring things that you don't want to experience. You know, if you've been through something before and a new situation has got the fingerprints of something old, then be careful. You know, sometimes that's showing us, yeah, you got to listen to your journey, mate, and pull away from this one. Sometimes it's actually asking you to ask deeper questions of the situation, because when you're not doing that, it's very easy to gloss over that there is an opportunity for healing within the self, whether that relationship's going to be a success or not. If it's coming out in that way, you want to ask yourself those questions before you then decide to go, no, this isn't right, back on the apps, let's go, fill your boots. So there, again, there's nuances there, you know. And also, like, if you're exploring a connection with someone and you're on the apps or anything like that, freeze your profile, deactivate your profile, go in invisible, delete the app or whatever, you know, while this connection is being explored. You know, I think with this one particularly, point number 7, a bit of nuance is key and important, but it's also about just kind of having that self-awareness of when you know where to draw the line with yourself. That's the main thing there. Point number 8, soft launching and hard launching your relationship like a product. Ooh. Because again, we're seeing relationships and people as commodities. You know, a person is not a can of Coke. You go buy a can of Coke pretty much anywhere on this planet, you know what you're going to get. You know, that's the power of having a strong brand. Ethics and all of the other stuff aside, you see a red can of Coke, you know what's happening. If you open that and you take a sip, you know what you're going to get there. But treating a relationship like a commodity is so dangerous, because you don't know what that's going to do to the connection, to the self-esteem of the people involved, for the sense of value that someone might have in your life, and also their view of you. You know, there is something that, you know, I remember once going out with someone, I was with them for over a year. They refused to have a picture taken because they refused to, essentially, because it turned out in the end, you know, from my estimation, they were embarrassed to be seen with me. And that really stuck in my heart, you know, for a little while there, because it took me a little bit of time to really come to the place of acceptance that that actually says more about them than it does me. I had very low self-esteem at the time, and if I could wind back the clock, you know, 11, 12 years and, you know, go through that experience again, but with my awareness of now, I wouldn't have gone anywhere near that person, because there was enough clues and tips that they weren't right. But the problem was there is, you know, seeing everything like a staged, managed, curated experience. So this gets rid of the humanity in things. One of the reasons I wanted to start doing these Dr. Love episodes was so much of this work is about relationships, whether it's relationship with others or relationship with self. I spend 95% of my time as a professional engaging with other people's relationships. So it's important for me to share some of the stuff that I've seen, and particularly with the things that we see on social media and how that trickles down. into the personal day-to-day experience, so we can make better choices, and we can see what works and what doesn't, and what helps and what harms. Again, this is only my perspective, and again, I share everything with a view that we're going in a progressive direction. We're trying to create better connection. We're trying to help people connect deeper with each other and within themselves, most importantly. I was having a chat with a friend earlier, and we're both creatives. And I was asking her, like, how do you deal with people that just come close to you because they see your light and they want it for their own? And she said something, and the one that really stuck in my mind was, you're the light and they're the moth, because I always thought about love, it's like you can appreciate a butterfly and you can see it, you can take a picture of it, you can let it go on its way, or you can catch it in a jar, and then ultimately the butterfly dies, but you can display it in your nice display cabinet in the wall. For me, that was always one of the binaries that seemed to make sense about connection and exploring connection and people's motivations. But the thing I found really interesting here is, when we're talking about relationships as products, speaking with my friend, both of us creative, both of us multifaceted individuals, there are big pieces of the pie that people are just not getting because it sits outside of the aesthetic that's trying to be created in the relationship, or it sits outside the relationship niche or anything like that. I cannot think of anything more dull and just blah than a relationship where all you ever do is the same flipping thing. You go to the same places, you eat at the same places, you go to holiday in the same place, and it's just like box checking. Where's the mutual growth? Where's the mutual exploration? Where's the sense of both of you doing something together that creates a little bit of a deeper journey? So when you treat things like a product, there is no life there. For those of you listening to this that have followed my work from the pre-podcast days, going back over the past sort of 5-6 years of talking about this stuff more openly, you will remember one of my very early things actually was talking about the difference between seeing people and life as a product or a process. A lot of this stuff here that we're discussing is talking about relationships and people as product. When something is product, it's finished. It's ready to go to market. There's no life. There may be a revised edition of it that comes a few years later and so forth. But people are not like that. If you're then launching your relationship brand with, oh my God, this amazing person, it's always this, da, 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 da. What happens when something else about their character comes up, or there's a different aspect of them? I'm not talking about bad stuff, just things that you've not foreseen, things that have not shown themselves. Because again, speaking to that idea of trying to get everything locked in within a month, some stuff just evolves over time. People change, people grow together or they grow apart, but there is always growth. And seeing something as a product, the finished article, does not give room for growth. So we need to get out of this commodified thinking. We need to get out of this idea of seeing people as precision engineered or not to fit into your life. Because if you're entering into a relationship with anyone, you should have your own energy and your own life and your own energetic space within all of that, under a sense of, this is what I'm in control of. This is my space. The relationship is the bigger space, but the other party or parties in the relationship also have their personal zone, their energy, their viewpoint, all of that. They're tending to that. It's being taken care of. And then you're creating something bigger together. Because when you do have that sense of self, and like I'm saying, you can't know someone else if you don't know yourself, you recognize that a good relationship is two people coming together to create something bigger. And they're doing so from a position and an energy and a place that they're actually happy about being themselves, and they're happy in their own zone. And anything that's going to come in is going to be an addition and an augmentation to what they've already got going on. I find this is quite an interesting selection of pointers for us to explore today, because when we have that fixed view of a situation is not growth focused, you know, a lot of people are talking about fixed mindset and growth mindset. Well, let's apply that to relationships. Don't go into a relationship with a fixed mindset. You know, there might be some things that you're like, this is non-negotiable for me. This is what I would like to experience. This is kind of the foundations that I need. This is the sort of engagement that would be most natural for me. But ultimately, everything serves that higher purpose of mutual growth, elevation, and expansion. So when we see things as alive and when we see things as in movement and in process, we're acknowledging that there is something here. There's a spark there of life within the situation, within the person. I don't know how many times over the years where I've noticed that people are trying to change me. They're trying to fit me into their idea of what is supposed to be the good thing, rather than just accepting me for who I am and me accepting them for who they are. And then we figure that out as we go, you know, because again, in every situation and in every connection, it's different. You're going to align in different spaces and places, and it's up to you to explore that. If you're just seeing things as the finished article, or coming into things from a place of assumption and expectation with your imaginary social media driven checklist, you're going to have a bad time. And we don't want to have a bad time. We're having a bad time enough as it is in this world right now. And one of the ways that we can start to kind of flavor the big soup in our favor is to create better relationships with ourselves, and from there, better relationships with others. So, you know, don't test people like you test driving a new car or testing out a product that you're going to send back a couple of days later. It's very harmful behavior, you know, because when we are all seeking connection of some kind, in very connected physically, literally, but disconnected emotionally, metaphorically, and figuratively, you've got to move accordingly. You know, you've got to be honest and you've got to have integrity, and you've got to be someone that shows up in their own energy, knowing who they are, but able to meet someone else where they're at, and then seeing what can be created from the alchemy of that moment, from the alchemy of that connection, from the fuse that is lit, and these kinds of things. It's a shame because you've got no idea how many relationship readings I do in my work and how much time I spend talking with people about their relationships and helping them with the relationships. And like I say, not just with others, but with the self as well. And these points that we're discussing today, they're not good because they're furthering that instant access mentality that is screwing up society, screwing up the planet, and screwing up the awareness that good things take time. And it's okay for good things to take time. And if anything, we could all be served for slowing. And if anything, we would all be well served to slow down a little bit, appreciate the little things, explore the nuances, and enjoy coming together with another from a place of openness, shared vulnerability, a focus of growth, a focus of acceptance of who the other person is, and not just trying to shoehorn them into your expectations because you like the way that they look. So, everyone, thank you for listening to The Big Soup episode 12, where we had another visitation from Dr. Love. I'm making the house calls. And yeah, do you know what? Let's do them again next week because we may as well just go through the list. So if you'd like me to make a house call for you, feel free to head over to my website, alistairballantyne.com, and check out all of the different services and ways that we can help support you in your relationships with yourself and your relationship with others. All right, once again, this is the end of The Big Soup, and I've been Alistair Ballantyne, and shall continue to be Alistair Ballantyne once this has finished. So, as ever, stay alert, stay aware, and think, do my actions and focuses and perspectives and feelings enhance the flavour of the big soup, or do they make it taste kind of sour?